Okay, so we're diving into some really cool stuff today.
Yeah.
All about how our brains learn, and,
Mm-hmm.
you guys have sent us a ton of stuff on this
Yes.
topic, so thanks for that. And we're focusing on the power of stories.
Right.
We've got this article. It's from April 2nd, 2025,
Mm-hmm.
called Why Human Brain Learns Best Through Stories,
Mm-hmm.
Learnography Perspective.
Yeah.
And it's by Shiva Narayan Taxila Page.
Yeah. And what really struck me about this piece is that it's not just saying, oh, stories are a nice way to learn.
Right.
It's arguing that our brains are actually wired for stories.
Yeah.
Like they're fundamental to how we understand and remember things.
Yeah, that's so interesting. And
Yeah.
it gets into some pretty fascinating concepts,
Uh-huh.
like instance-guided object learning.
Yes.
They call it IGL.
Yeah. Yeah.
And this whole idea of brainpage theory.
Mm.
And it kind of makes you think, right? Have you ever noticed how,
Mhm.
like, some information just sticks with you?
Yeah.
It's like you lived it or something.
Exactly.
But then other stuff just
Oh.
disappears the minute you hear it.
Yeah, totally.
So this deep dive we're doing today is all about exploring that, like
Mhm.
why stories might be the key to really getting knowledge to stick.
I'm excited.
Me too.
Yeah.
So let's start with this idea that our brains are kind of like natural storytellers.
Right. Yeah.
What's the article have to say about that?
Well, it points out that this isn't some new fad or anything. Humans have been telling stories for, like, forever.
Right.
I mean, think about myths,
Mm-hmm.
folk tales,
Mm-hmm.
all those oral histories.
Yeah.
Way before we had written language, that was how we passed down knowledge.
Like the original way of
That was-
sharing information.
Yeah, the original hard drive.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important to keep in mind
Uh-huh.
because it shows us just how deeply rooted this storytelling thing is
Yeah.
in our brains.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we're trying to learn something new, a story gives us this framework, this context
Yeah.
that helps us connect it to what we already know.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not just like memorizing a bunch of random facts.
Right, it's making sense of it.
Yeah, exactly. It's like
Putting it all together.
making it part of our understanding of the world.
Totally.
So the article then goes into the neuroscience of it all,
Oh, yeah.
which is super interesting, right?
Fascinating stuff.
Because it's not just about stories being engaging or entertaining.
Right.
There's actually something happening in our brains
Yeah, on a biological level.
when we're engaged with a story.
Mm-hmm.
So the article talks about the default mode network,
Yes.
or DMN for short.
DMN.
And it's all about self-reflection and imagination.
Exactly. And like really understanding those narratives.
Right. So we're not just passively listening.
No.
We're like
you know.
stepping into the story,
Yeah.
connecting with the characters,
Hearing what they feel.
feeling the emotions.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's the hippocampus,
Yeah.
which is essential for forming new memories
Memory central.
and stories
Mm.
because they have this structure,
Mm-hmm.
this beginning, middle, and end.
Flow.
Give the hippocampus something to work with
Yeah, a structure.
to organize and store those memories.
Like giving it the filing system.
Yeah, like
for the
little
whole
folders to put everything in.
Exactly.
Love that analogy.
Right. And of course, we can't forget about emotions.
Oh, yeah, emotions are huge.
That's where the amygdala comes in.
Right.
And we all know that when something's emotional,
Yeah,
that memory tends to stick around.
it's powerful.
It's powerful, right? So
Yeah.
if a story makes us laugh or cry or whatever, we're way more likely to remember it.
Makes sense.
So we've got the DMN, the hippocampus, the amygdala, all firing up.
It's a party in there.
It's a party, right? But wait, there's more.
Oh, there's more.
The article also talks about the motor cortex.
Yeah, and this is where things get really wild.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
So the motor cortex is all about movement.
Right.
But here's the thing. When we imagine actions in a story,
Okay.
even if we're just sitting still,
Uh-huh.
our motor cortex lights up.
Wow.
Like it's actually simulating those movements.
So our brains are basically practicing.
Exactly. Isn't that amazing?
That's so cool.
So it's not just about understanding the story.
Right.
It's like our brains are rehearsing the actions, the concepts.
I love it.
And that, according to the article, is a huge part of what makes stories such a powerful learning tools.
Yeah, it's not just passive, it's active.
Exactly.
It's like we're really experiencing it.
And this whole thing about knowledge transfer, right?
Uh-huh.
Like being able to take what we've learned
Mm-hmm.
and actually use it
Yes.
in different situations.
That's the goal, right?
That's the goal. And the article says that stories are key to making that happen.
You can see how that would be that.
So first of all, stories help us connect new knowledge
Mm-hmm.
to stuff we already know.
It's like building a bridge.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
They give us these relatable scenarios,
Yeah.
these anchors in our own experience.
Yeah. So it's not just some abstract idea floating out there.
Right. It's like, oh, I can see how this applies to my life.
He makes it real.
It makes it real, exactly. And then stories naturally organize information.
Oh, yeah. They have that structure.
They have that structure, that beginning, middle, and end.
Yeah.
And that helps us make sense of even complex stuff.
It's like a roadmap.
Like a roadmap, yeah.
Yeah.
And because of that structure,
Mm-hmm.
it's easier to remember,
Makes sense.
easier to recall the information later.
So much easier.
And then there's this idea that stories help us predict outcomes
interesting.
and solve problems
Yeah.
in new situations.
How so?
Well, when we've encountered similar scenarios in stories,
Mm-hmm.
we're kind of primed to anticipate challenges
Okay.
and come up with solutions.
Like we've seen it before.
Yeah, like we've been there before, even if it was just in our imagination.
Right, right.
And this is where that IGL thing comes in.
IGL, yeah.
Instance-guided object learning.
Mm-hmm.
It's all about using stories
Mhm.
to provide these concrete examples
Okay.
that are linked to real-world things.
So it's not just theory.
Exactly. It's like making the abstract
Yeah,
feel concrete, yeah.
Uh-huh.
So the article gives this example of learning
Yeah.
about gravity
Right.
through the story of Newton and the apple.
Right.
Suddenly, it's not just this law of physics.
It's a story.
It's a story. It's an image.
It's memorable.
It's memorable, yeah. So now let's get into this brain page development thing.
Okay, brain pages.
Because this seems like a really crucial part of the article's argument.
Yeah, what are they exactly?
So brain page theory says that when we really learn something,
Yeah.
it's not just stored as like a random bit of data.
Right.
It's transformed into these efficient neural pathways, these brain page maps and modules.
Interesting.
And these act like shortcuts
yeah.
in our brains.
Like a superhighway.
Yeah, like a superhighway for accessing and using that knowledge.
So it's not just stored. It's organized for quick retrieval.
Exactly. And the article argues that stories are like the building blocks for these brain pages.
They help create those pathways.
Yeah, and they do it in a few ways.
Okay, how so?
First of all, stories engage multiple senses.
Right.
We visualize the scenes. We hear the dialogue.
We feel the emotion.
We feel the emotion.
It's a full-on experience.
It's a full-on experience.
Yeah.
And all that sensory input strengthens those neural connections.
The memory is more vivid, more accessible.
Exactly. And then there's repetition.
Oh, yeah.
Good stories often repeat key elements, themes, important details.
Right. It reinforces the message.
It reinforces the message, yeah.
Without feeling like you're cramming.
Without feeling like you're cramming. Exactly. It's natural. Organic. It's organic, right. And then remember the motor cortex.
Oh, yeah, the movement part.
When we mentally simulate the actions in a story, we're actually strengthening those motor circuits.
So it's like practicing in our minds.
Exactly. And that builds procedural memory.
The how-to memory.
The how-to memory, yeah. So it's all connected.
I'm seeing the connections now.
Right. And the article talks about these brain page schools.
Brain page school.
Yeah, it's like this vision for the future of education.
Interesting.
Where they leverage this understanding of story-based learning.
So it's not just about lectures and textbooks.
Exactly. It's about active knowledge construction.
Yeah, I like that.
It's about making it personal.
So everyone's learning in their own way.
Exactly. And then the article gets into the practical applications.
Okay, yeah. How do we actually use this?
Like, how do we apply this in real life? And one area they talk about is book-to-brain knowledge transfer.
Book to brain, that sounds useful.
It's all about changing the way we read.
Oh, how so?
Instead of just passively absorbing the words, we actively visualize the concepts
Yeah.
as elements in a story.
Like creating a movie in your head.
Yeah, like creating a movie in your head.
I do that sometimes.
And that helps us understand and remember so much better.
It makes it more engaging, for sure.
It's more engaging, yeah. And then there's task-based learning through stories.
Okay, task-based learning.
This is all about embedding narratives in problem-solving activities.
So like real-world applications.
Exactly. So, for example,
Yeah.
instead of just giving students a math problem,
Right.
you could turn it into a scenario about planning a trip or something.
Okay, that's fun.
Right. Or you could use historical events as narratives to teach about cause and effect.
Yeah, like a story that unfolds.
Yeah, exactly. And for science, you could use fictional case studies
Oh, that's cool.
and simulate real-world problems.
So they're applying the knowledge in a meaningful way.
Exactly. It's about making it active, giving it context.
It's not just theoretical anymore.
Right. And the cool thing is,
Yeah.
this approach isn't limited to just like academic stuff.
Okay.
The article talks about how it can be used to develop soft skills, and emotional intelligence.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, they call them miniature schools of learnography.
Miniature schools.
Yeah, it's like these little learning environments
Yes.
where people work together to solve problems through storytelling.
So they're taking on roles.
Exactly. They're taking on roles.
Working collaboratively.
They're working collaboratively. They're developing empathy.
That's fantastic.
It's really cool stuff.
Yeah, it sounds like a much more holistic approach.
Exactly. So the article makes a big deal about why these brainpage schools should prioritize story-based learning.
Yeah.
And they talk about this concept of a happiness classroom.
Happiness classroom.
Yeah, it's like this idea that
Okay.
when learning aligns with how our brains naturally work, it becomes more enjoyable, more memorable.
So it's not a chore.
It's not a chore, exactly. And they outline what they call the story-making function.
The story-making function. Okay.
Yeah, and it has some key benefits.
Like what?
First of all, it boosts comprehension and memory.
We've talked about that.
We've talked about that, yeah.
It just makes sense.
It makes sense, right?
Yeah.
It also encourages independent learning.
So people are more motivated to learn on their own.
Exactly. And it enhances creativity and critical thinking.
Because you're constantly engaging with the story.
Yeah, you're not just passively absorbing.
You're thinking. You're imagining.
You're thinking. You're imagining. You're problem solving.
Right.
And of course, it helps develop strong problem solving skills.
Yeah. Because you're facing challenges within the story.
Yeah, and you're figuring out how to overcome them.
It's like a safe space to practice.
It's like a safe space to practice, exactly. So the article is basically arguing for this huge shift from these traditional talking classrooms to these brainpage schools.
Where storytelling is at the heart of it all.
Where storytelling is at the heart of it all, yeah.
That's exciting.
It's exciting, right?
Yeah.
And as we get to the end of the article, what are the main takeaways?
Well, it really drives home this point that the human brain is just wired for stories. It's how we make sense of the world.
It's how we learn best.
Yeah, it's how we learn best.
And this whole system learnography thing.
System learnography, right?
It's basically the practical application of all this.
Yeah, using those IGLs, brainpage theory.
Brainpage theory, yeah.
And those engaging, story-driven tasks.
Exactly. And the goal is not just to accumulate a bunch of facts,
right,
but to really understand the knowledge.
Yeah, to internalize it.
To internalize it, to be able to recall it and apply it in real-world situations.
That's powerful.
It's powerful, right?
Yeah.
So the article ends with this really great quote.
Okay, what is it?
It says, "Every learner is a natural story maker. By embracing story-driven learning, we can unlock the full potential of brain for a smarter, faster, and more efficient knowledge transfer process."
I love that.
It's inspiring, right?
And they have this call to action at the end.
A call to action.
Yeah, and I think it's a really great question for all of us.
Okay, what is it?
It asks, considering your interest in effective learning, what are some ways you could start incorporating story-based thinking into how you approach new information or challenges?
It's a great question for self-reflection.
It is. It is. And the last section of the article is called Unlocking the Brain's Story-Making Power, a New Path to Self-Directed Learning.
I like that.
It's by Shiva Narayan.
Shiva Narayan, yeah.
And if you want to learn more, the article tells you to visit the Takshila page for more information on system learnography.
So there's a whole world to explore there.
There is. There is. And I think the most important thing to remember is this. Don't just try to memorize stuff.
Actively build your knowledge.
Tell your own stories.
Tell your own stories.
Yeah.
That's how our brains are designed to learn.
I'm definitely going to try that.
Me too.
This has been eye-opening.
Yeah, it's been a great deep dive.
It really has.
Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
See you next time.